God is angry, and so am I. God is righteous, and therefore God's anger is just and righteous. The Jewish scriptures abound in images of God's anger, God's wrath. So often I align myself with God's law and justice, and therefore my anger also is righteous. And so I cry out with the psalmist, "Do I not hate those who hate you, O Lord? And do I not loathe those who rise up against you? I hate them with complete hatred. I count them my enemies." This is my participation in God's anger and wrath. Let us take the time to look upon these images of righteous anger, wrath, and their closely associated images of sacrifice. Let us especially examine the sacrifices that we ourselves have made for others, for family, and for friends. If we dare to look closely enough, we will soon enough encounter the embers of resentment and anger. Sometimes this resentment and anger is barely below the surface in our barbed and critical remarks. When we get cause and effect in the wrong order, and additionally personify God's emotion to reflect our own feelings, things do fall apart, and the very first victim, along with Abel, is inevitably compassion and love. Using our own interpretation of Scripture to define love, rather than the foundation of love to interpret Scripture, fear and anger, resentment and blaming, leads to separation and disintegration. Family ties fall apart, and communities concern themselves with law and statutes to set themselves apart from a world that is crying out in travail. Without love, we mistake the map for reality. The explorer returned to his people, who were eager to know about the Amazon. But how could he ever put the words, the feelings that flooded his heart when he saw exotic flowers and heard the night sounds of the forest, when he sensed the danger of the wild beasts, or paddled his canoe over the treacherous rapids? He said, "Go and find out for yourself." To guide them, he drew a map of the river. They pounced upon the map, they framed it in their town hall, they made copies of it for themselves, and all who had a copy considered themselves experts on the river. For did they not know its every turn and bend, how broad it was, how deep, and where the rapids were and where the falls? It is said that Buddha obdurately refused to be drawn into talking of God. He was obviously familiar with the dangers of drawing maps for armchair explorers. First comes love, and only then can we recognize Jesus in the breaking of the bread. Those 2 disciples on the road to Emmaus were dejected, disappointed. This great prophet, Jesus, had not lived up to their expectation. It was only once their hearts had become inflamed by God's incarnated love that they came to understand the Scriptures. It was only in this flame of love that the Emmaus disciples recognized Jesus in the breaking of the bread. It is no coincidence that love finds expression in poetry. My intellect sees what has happened, but it cannot explain it. It can see and wishes to explain, but can find no word that suffice. For what it sees is invisible and entirely formless, simple, completely uncompounded, unbounded in its awesome greatness. What I have seen is the totality recapitulated as one, received not in essence, but in participation. Just as if you lit a flame from a flame, it is the whole flame you receive. It was our Franciscan brother, John Duns Scotus, who led the way for us. We love God because God first loved us. Rather than knowledge and understanding, it is love that leads to love. Look into the eyes of a mother and father as they gaze upon the newborn babe. This is the ongoing Easter image of resurrection and new life. God's revelation to us in the eternal Word, incarnated in the person of Jesus the Christ, is an invitation for all of us to participate in this dance of life, present in the here and now of history. This is our participation in the life of God, each one of us with our own particular communion of gifts. God's family coming together, kneeling together, singing together, listening to Scripture together, praying together, and sharing together in God's greatest gift of love, the Eucharist and our communion. As the introduction to the new lectionary says, in every age and in every place, coming together as God's people to praise and to worship, in supplication and in thanksgiving, in times of celebration, in times of commiseration, and in times of danger. This is a reminder as we gather in our homes around the world during this time of isolation and lockdown, facing together as humanity this new and terrible threat, not only to our financial survival, health, and lives, but to our very humanity itself. Yes, we know that there is great danger, there is selfishness, there is disorder, and there is sin. But we also acknowledge our hope that wherever these abide, God's grace abides the greater. This is the time, now is the opportunity, now is the call to humanity, clear and loud. We are called together as one people on this pale blue dot, to uphold and to support the weak and the helpless, to share in the ample resources of this one world, to put aside our guns, our greed, and our grievances, to put aside our anger and our wars, and to participate in the dance of life through union and communion. In this great abundance of grace, there is an abundance for all of our needs. On our current trajectory, there is no winner's podium, no profit or market in a dying people on a forlorn and fractured planet. This is our call to join the disciples and to turn back from the road to Emmaus, to turn back from the place of hot water. The Lord grant you peace.